Your poop tells a story, a very important story. The color, the texture, the smell, all of it tells a very unique story. Now you're going to learn what your poop says about your gut health and the root causes of issues like your Crohn's and colitis. We're going to break it down to just 5 types of poop. We're going to call them rocks, logs, snakes, pudding, and tea. We're going to talk about the different colors and what the different smells can actually mean. We're going to talk about what it actually says about your body's overall health and some other organ systems that might be compromised. And of course, we're going to talk about what you can learn about things like stool labs, like GI mapping. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Josh Deck. I'm an IBD specialist, medical lecturer, physician's consultant for Crohn's, colitis, and severe IBS, and the scientific strategist and education director for the Root Cause for Crohn's Colitis organization. And today, I am showing you how to read your poop like a crystal ball. Now, the good news is you don't have to touch it like a crystal ball. We're just gonna use your eyes and your nose. So let's get into this one. There is a gold standard for poop. We're gonna talk about that. When I say a gold standard, what does that mean? I mean best case scenario, a perfectly healthy stool. What is it gonna look like? What's it gonna sound like, smell like, etc. So here's what we're gonna do. We got 5 main textures we're talking about: rocks, logs, snakes, pudding, and tea. I'm sure you can distill down what those mean, but here's what we wanna know. The gold standard, the best stool you can really have, is going to be snakes. This means it comes out, it's one piece, however long it might be, and you feel very well, fully voided after that. Now, we're also gonna have only 1 to 2 wipes. This means you give it a wipe, it's not sticky, it's not wet, it's not still going, there's not multiples after, 1, 2, and done. It should, ideally, depends who you ask, we say sink to the bottom. Boop, down it goes, it's not floating and breaking apart. We also wanna see, we're gonna call like a mid-brown color. Not too light, not too dark, just kind of like that milk chocolate brown. If I'm ruining chocolate for you, you're welcome. And what we also want to know, I'm not going to say no smell, all poop smells, unless you're outcast. OGs will get that. But anyway, it shouldn't linger in the bathroom. The smell shouldn't be something that's horrible, that's lingering around, that's just like, takes half an hour to close, you got to light a match and a candle. It shouldn't be that smelly. So it should be snakes, solid piece, voided 1 to 2 stools, 1 wipe, sinks, mid-brown, doesn't stink or doesn't linger. That's what we're looking for. Now, the problem is we have anything outside of this. Remember, we have these different textures, we're calling them rocks, think pellets and pebbles. We have logs, which are gonna be harder, thicker, typically a lot clumpier. Then we have your snakes, which is kind of right in the middle. Then you got pudding, which is gonna be a lot looser, and then tea. And we all know what the texture of tea is. And so that's sort of how we're breaking it down. You guys can go to the Bristol stool chart if you want something more medically broken down, more diverse, but this is a great way to look at it for now. These are the perfect stool right here in the middle. Anything above or below is indications of forms or the spectrum variant of constipation or diarrhea. So it's just gonna depend on what's what. So here's the thing. Your texture, if you guys are hearing, I got a wiener dog down here who is absolutely shameless. Show your face, Bruce. He's just digging right now. But anyway, so that's what he's doing. But here's what we're talking about. There's different textures you can get. Let's go through the round of these ones. If we've got too many rocks, it's too hard, things aren't working very well, it means your transit time is too slow. It's too dry, it's too rocky, it's too clumpy. You might be over-absorbing all the water, which means you're over-absorbing toxins. This also means, in general, you've got poor digestion. It's just not working very well. You might be dehydrated. You might have, again, problems absorbing all these extra toxins, which toxify your gut even more. You might have too little or too much fiber. In fact, there's lots of studies. We always think, well, I gotta be able to get a bowel movement. I should eat more fiber. There are a lot of studies showing that those who are constipated in the rocks or the logs, that you're gonna have too much fiber. Cutting it back might actually be a really good thing for you. There's a big debate about fiber and what we need. But this is one textural thing we can look at, okay? Dry, rocky, lumpy, and firm. The other thing we can see with texture, we might even see something that's sticky. What does sticky mean? I'm sure we've all been there. You've gone to a wipe and it just takes 5, 6, 7, or it sticks to the bowl, leaves a streak. This is sticky. This is going to mean there's bacterial issues, typically overgrowth. You might have some issues with fat absorption. We call this fat malabsorption. So it's going to be really oily and kind of wet. It could be a lot of excess gas that creates air bubbles in there, giving it more sort of a porousness to stick. And so this is going to show there's overgrowth. So too hard, too slow. Too sticky, too much fat, too much bacteria often. There's other things we can look at as well. Your color of your stool is going to show us a lot of information about you and what's going on. Consider some stools might actually be pale or almost gray in color. What does a pale gray stool mean? Well, it's typically going to look to show issues with bile. So bile insufficiency, or that your gallbladder and your liver might be congested. It might not be producing enough bile. Bile contributes to the color that we see. Now, if we see this pale gray, it's typically bile insufficiency. On the other hand, if it actually gets a bit too green, because that's what bile is going to be, is a greeny yellow color. If it's too green, maybe you have really rapid transit times. Maybe it's actually showing that your body's dumping bile or you're not reabsorbing your bile very well. This can even be called BAM, or bile acid malabsorption, can be in this spectrum as well. If it's sort of green, it might also show, could be like a detoxifying reaction. It's too much dumping into your system. And that can be what's going on there. So it can tell us your liver and gallbladder are dysfunctional. That can be parasitic, it can be heavy metals, it can be mold that contribute to this thing, which leads to these types of colors. Now, what if your stool is like yellow? It can be yellow and oily, it can be yellow and frothy and kind of airy or really loose. Yellow, again, typically going to mean fat malabsorption, pancreatic insufficiency, or even SIBO. That's SIBO, stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So you can have too much bacteria, can lead to these yellowy colors. On the other hand, if it's like yellowy, almost like a foul, sweet honey smell, you could have a C. diff infection. Really like yellow, runny, watery stools with that yellow, very foul smell, and it's highly contagious. So I mean, closing the lid after you flush and then sanitize that. Wash your hands like crazy because those spores can get everywhere. On the other hand now, we talked about pale and gray. We got yellow, greasy, wet, oily, typically fat malabsorption, so that's fat in your stool. That'll often be paired with a really foul smell because you can be hyper fermenting these fats as well, which can lead to all kinds of odd smells and textures. Now, there's two other kinds of bleeding we're going to talk about. You can have what's called like a black tarry stool. So tarry can be both in texture and in color. If it's almost sticky or almost looks like coffee grounds, that can be coagulated blood. It can be an upper GI bleed. So esophagus, stomach, small bowel, that can come out after it's been coagulated, showing black. Or of course, there's bright red, and you're all familiar with this, which is going to be ulcers, fistulas, hemorrhoids, any kind of lower GI bleed where the blood is coming out before it coagulates and turns dark. So this is what we want to know about color. But let's talk a bit more about smell. Smell tells us lots about your stool and what's going on and what might be driving your issues. The more foul a stool smells, the more bacterial overgrowth you likely have. There's a direct correlation between the smell and the amount of gassiness that you have and the amount of bacteria that's in there. If there's big overgrowth of bacteria, they're going to produce all these extra byproducts. All a fart really is like a trillion little itty bitty bacterial farts that turn into one big gas bubble, and out it goes. And so if you have a really foul smelling gas or really foul smelling stools, there's likely a lot of bacterial overgrowth. But then we can pair this with other things and look at yellow, oily, greasy stool. Well, that smell could also be in combination. It could be malabsorbing fats and hyperfermentation. So keep that in mind as well. There's different types of smells. Now, if you're getting more of like that rotten egg smell, it's almost like sulfury. This can actually be an indicator that your liver is really congested. It's not breaking down these sulfur compounds and using them properly. Now, this can again be caused by toxins, metals, alcohol, mold, parasites, can all congest the liver. If you have low levels of glutathione, these antioxidants your body naturally produces. If you have low levels, sometimes you get that foul smell. So again, back to liver and bile congestion. We have to open those up. Two of the biggest congested pathways in IBD I see ever are liver and bile ducts. We have to watch for that. Now, if you maybe have, this one's a bit more rare, but if it's almost like a sweet, even fruity kind of smell. Now, it's not going to be fruity like an apple. It's going to be still poop. But keep in mind, a sweeter, fruity smell can sometimes show carbohydrate malabsorption. And oftentimes that can show us candida overgrowth. Now, there's other pairs. One smell doesn't always indicate a perfect issue. This is why we're talking about smell and color and all these things in different areas, because it can all mean different things in context. Think about it. How many uses for the F word can you think of? Like 50. All used in context, it means different things. So all these pieces we're giving you matter in context. So apply it to what you've learned so far. Let's talk about something else. This is a very important part of looking at your stool to see what's going on. We're going to call this components. Now, in a perfect world, we go back to our gold standard poop. That's going to be a snake. It's going to be solid, one wipe, sinks to the bottom. It's medium brown. The smell doesn't linger. Now, we have components. That means it's not smooth. It's not one color. It might be multicolored. It might be chunky. You might have bits and pieces or flecks or specks or all kinds of chunks in it. This is telling us something. If you have chunks of food, you're not absorbing. It can be low stomach acid. It can be pancreatic insufficiency, which is very common. We call it EPI, or exocrine pancreatic insufficiency. We see this a lot with IBD, but often again is paired with liver and gallbladder congestion. So you could have some issues there. Again, SIBO, etc. So if you're seeing actual parts and pieces or undigested food, your body is not breaking it down. That can also come with rapid transit time. Other things we want to look at. If you have other components like foam or air bubbles, this can be excess gas, which again points us back to bacterial overgrowth. But here's what's really interesting. A large thing that I see a lot of in Crohn's colitis is we can actually see white or even yellow flecks, like speckles or spots or flecks. This is a huge indicator of candida, which is a fungal overgrowth. If candida is overgrowing, you can even get almost looks like, I'm going to ruin bubble tea for everybody. But you know the little pearls that come in bubble tea? They can be that size or even smaller, but like kind of white or even yellowish. That can often be candida, which is fungus. And if you get these little white specks or flecks, it's a big candida issue. We need to really manage some of that and bring that fungal overgrowth down. Other things you might be able to see, perhaps you're seeing strings, or even could look like thin little worms. They can be long, they can be short, they can be rounded. Or if you're even seeing something that looks like almost like tomato skins or like bell pepper skins, like they're folded or rolled, that is actually liver flukes if you haven't eaten those potatoes or tomato skins. So strings, worms, skins look like folded up. Those can be parasitic as well. We don't always see them in our stool, but we can. It's very, very common. I've seen people pass some pretty crazy stuff where it's almost like a golf ball and it's like the texture of petroleum jelly. There's all kinds of wild stuff your body can pass. Depends on what's congested. Bile and cholesterol and fat and parasites. I've seen these big, thick, stringy, like thickness of your thumb or more, thick, stringy, clumpy bits, which are often called mucoid plaques, which can be buildup of skin and gut lining and fungus and all kinds of stuff. Even worms can coat themselves in all kinds of stuff, and they can look like these plaques. So there's a lot of stuff that can come out of us, which is a little bit terrifying sometimes, but they're there. Ultimately, what we have to look at is all these bits and pieces. The smelly, I'm going to simplify this. The smellier your stool is, the more bacteria you probably have. If you're seeing undigested food, it's rapid transit time or an insufficiency of digestion. So stomach acid, digestive enzymes, liver. Almost everybody with Crohn's colitis needs to open their liver, gallbladder, and bile ducts and just get things moving. Lots of things we can do for that, but we'll get to that through the question if we need to. If you are experiencing textures besides smoothness, again, it's malabsorption or it's something that shouldn't be in there. Fungus, worms, etc. Unfortunately, we can't check for mold just looking at your stool, but if you're sending a stool sample like a GI map, sometimes there are things that can be measured. Sometimes you can look at tests like an organic acid or get a urine test and check for mold if you're worried about that. But keeping in mind, 70% of US homes have a mold problem. There's a good chance you do as well. But a GI map is a stool sample that measures your gut bacteria. We call this your gut microbiome, and it measures all the good and all the bad guys that we can possibly detect with our technology we have today. And we can see what's high, what's low. Now, a lot of people come to me and go, Josh, I want a GI map. I want a stool sample. That's going to be my golden ticket out of here. Consider this. A GI map is not all it's always cracked up to be. Context matters. So let's look at this. Your gut down here. Your bacteria is all messed up, okay? And this is what we measure with a GI map. That's a stool sample. You poop in a box, send it to the mail. You got to look someone in the eye at the post office and give them this present. But you send it to a lab. Okay. Well, your gut bacteria is all messed up. Why? Your gut bacteria measured with a GI map is a downstream issue from something that started it up top. So there are many other resources or tests that I prefer to do before I go to a GI map. Maybe it's just symptoms, maybe it's history, maybe it's organic acids, maybe it's a total tox test, maybe it's hair tissue mineral analysis. But there's other things that can point to why we're down here. It's like going in for a colonoscopy. Look how inflamed you are. You're all red. It's here, here, and here. It tells me where you are inflamed, how bad you are inflamed, but not why you are inflamed. We always want to go back to roots upstream. I want to know what messed your bacteria up. Now, there are markers in there sometimes we can detect. Well, Josh, what about parasites? Sometimes, it's very, very rare you can actually find them on stool. They can hide in muscles, liver, lungs, pancreas, bile ducts, wherever. They don't always come out in stool. Even if they are in your bowel, we don't always see them. There are other markers we can look at that can indicate parasites, like something we call EAP, stands for eosinophil activation protein. This eosinophil is a type of white blood cell, often elevated about 30% of the time. They're elevated with an active parasite infection. There's all kinds of bits and pieces we can gather in context. So don't go rushing for a GI map just yet to try to measure a stool sample. I want to know why it happened in the first place. But here's what I want to do. Your stool tells a lot about you. It's the window basically to your soul. It tells us all about your gut, tells us all about your body, tells us all about your root causes. It's one of those things where if you think about it, you and I'm speaking the English language and you're listening in the English language. The more words I use in my vocabulary, the broader of a concept I can explain. And once you understand it, you can go from basic words like shopping, buying groceries, and asking where the bathroom is, to understanding poetry and literature, right? Context matters around these words. The same thing with all these symptoms that we're going through, different colors, textures, smells, components of your stool, they all tell us something, but it all is very contextual. So I was able to go through this today to give you an idea, but you have to understand the broader spectrum. But there's a couple of things that are easy. If your stool is oily and greasy, it's a gallbladder, liver, bile duct issue. You're not absorbing fats. And I have to sneeze. There it is. There's usually two, and I'll get back to you. So we know greasy stool is a giveaway. Always going to be an issue with fats. But why? Typically, it's liver and gallbladder that's messed up. You're not absorbing. You're not producing enough bile. Why? We always have to go back and ask why till we can get to the root cause. And this is really what we do here is dive into root causes.